Welcome back to Building a Fighter. My name is Dr. Austin Shane, sports chiropractor in Scottsdale, Arizona. With me, as always, badass strength coach in Denver, Colorado, Alex Friedman. Today, we're going to be talking about sport-specific exercises, and specifically, do they exist? So, Alex, sports specificity or sport-specific exercises is one of the most contested points in strength and conditioning right now. All I see on X, formerly known as Twitter, are people bitching and moaning about if something is sports specific or not. So what's your take on this?
Oh God. Yeah, there's a lot of controversy, and I think we came into strength conditioning at the point where sports specific exercise was becoming popular, and then the hardcore strength coaches were pushing against it, and it's that doesn't do anything, and blah 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 blah. And where I rely on my information is Anatoly Bondarchuk's work, which is transfer of training to sport. So what are you actually doing, and what effect does that have on your end game? And he did that study in track and field, which is a lot more controlled variable, right?
Well,
Than
it's just
MMA,
sprint training.
obviously.
That's a part of strength and conditioning.
Right. And he did it a lot with throwing as well. So, but it exists on a gradient, right? There's a spectrum of more general exercises to more specific exercises. If you want to get to the most specific exercise, go spar.
Yeah,
That's
do your sport.
right. That's it. Do your sport. You get a little bit away from that. That's your technical drilling. You get a bit of, that's probably more of your tactical training, right? Here's some of our parameters, blah, blah, blah. You go more away from that. Here's your technical. Do this one set piece that I'm going to orchestrate for you. And you get more away from that. And it's a derivative of your sport, like wrestling would be like ankle tag, right? Ankle tag is a sport specific exercise if you want to quantify it like that. Get a little more away from that. Okay. Now we're doing stance and motion. Now we're doing, vaguely wrestling type shit, more away from that. Okay. We're in the weight room. Maybe we're doing a sandbag carry, right? And locking our hands like a gable grip. And that's somewhat sport specific, but also a lot more general in the sense of you're carrying a sandbag, not trying to toss a human being, right? And so again, everything exists on a gradient in that scale, and that's how I kind of scale it down as competitive or competition exercises, aka doing your sport, specialty exercises, and then we go all the way down to our general prep exercises, which are our basic barbell movements and weight room movement.
Yeah, 100%. I think of this on a similar gradient or spectrum that Alex is talking about. We have if we're sport specific, is sparring. Then we work our way back tactical. Then we work our way back technical. Then we work our way back from there to SPP or sports specific prep. And then we go from SPP to GPP. Mm-hmm. Or technically SPP is sports physical preparedness or specific physical preparedness. And then we have general physical preparedness, which is GPP.
There we go.
But as we go across that spectrum, even though we say a sandbag clean, for example, is not the same as lifting a human up and suplexing them, right? It's a very similar looking movement, though. There is nothing wrong with picking that exercise because it looks like something that athlete can connect to their sport.
Yeah.
Part of training is getting an athlete to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Guess what? Doing a sandbag clean, that allows them, without me having to even say anything, understand what I'm trying to get them to do. It is a cue in and of itself to do that specific exercise instead of doing, say, a barbell clean. Mm-hmm. They might not understand the transfer of a barbell clean into strength conditioning or into wrestling performance, so to say. Mm-hmm. They will understand a sandbag clean into wrestling because it feels very similar to lifting somebody up in a straight lift. Well, guess what? That athlete is going to put more intent into the thing that they think is going to get them better. That's my biggest issue with the people that shit on sport-specific training is they're just arguing about semantics. It's the same fucking people that are arguing about pain science. Yeah. They're just oh, you don't need to do any manual therapy. Well, that's also wrong too. It's the same with sport-specific exercises. The same people that are saying there's no such thing as sport-specific exercises are the ones that are using the ones that look like sport-specific exercises. They just wanted to be contrarian that they say there's no sport-specific exercises.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's the art of like meeting your athlete where they're at, right? You
Mm-hmm.
know, if I have a jujitsu player that is fucked up and I know needs strength and conditioning, or no, I know needs some like longevity care of their body,
Right.
the only thing that gets them into the weight room is like a sandbag clean, and then kettlebell swings and front rack carries and shit that they think, or zercher squats, shit that they think is jujitsu oriented, right? That's the only thing that gets them in the weight room. I can meet them there, and then I can influence what I want as we continue a relationship. And then, you know, things like that. You can use sport specific exercises, or what are leaning more towards specific exercises in that capacity. But at the end of the day, it's meeting your athlete where they're at, and then using the right tool in the right context for the right job.
Mm-hmm.
That's the artistry of this whole coaching thing and strength and conditioning is, you know, your athlete is going to drive intent based on what they see the worth in your movement, right? So that jiu-jitsu athlete that doesn't believe in barbell cleans, right? I hear that all the time. I don't believe in barbell cleans. Or I don't.
You don't believe they're a
They're
thing?
fucking
You don't
imaginary. What?
believe they exist?
There's a million videos on Instagram. Go watch them.
Have you seen CrossFit?
Yeah, or like it's like, what do you mean you don't believe in it? But they don't believe it'll be effective for them, or they have a like a distaste for them, right? That's not going to get as much training effect as something they do have taste for, they do think is going to be super effective, right? It's like the art of meeting somebody where they're at. Are they ready to like full on cross train? Is that way they came to see you, right? Because there's those people too that are like okay at jujitsu, and then they're like, no, I just want to be a badass and lift a bunch of weight. It's like, all right, we'll temper that a little bit, but I can give you the heavy lifting piece, right? And here's how we're going to do it with a trap bar or with a barbell or whatever. So yeah, I think your sport specific training comes down to a lot of semantics, like Austin's talking about, and then a little bit of like ingenuity or artisan type of mastery is like, where do I plug this in? When is it going to be of the most use? Right. And in a fight camp per se, or with your jiu-jitsu athlete, we want to peak and taper as we get closer to the fight, closer to the camp. Let's do some sport specific movements, something that looks like the sport, something that can mimic that stimulus, or, um, get a little bit more buy-in and confidence and oomph at the end of your camp, right? We go general to specific, right? That's why maybe we cut out a day of strength and conditioning towards the end of camp and things like this. So it's there for you to use. It's not, does it exist or not? It's not, is it good or bad? It's like, and we'll get into this later, some of the shit we see is silly, but
A lot of the shit we see is silly.
it's there for you to use to your advantage with your sport specific exercises, quote unquote.
Right. It is everything in life. We go one way where, okay, we're trying to learn how do we pick an exercise that looks like the sport, or how do we pick something that the athlete can connect with, is really why coaches move towards something. And then, of course, somebody's going to take it too far. You're going to see the dickwad that's doing a single leg Bosu squat and going out right into a sprawl, into a shot, into a sandbag clean, just looking like a dumbass. And then, of course, everybody on the other side of the argument is going to say, well, that's fucking stupid, which it is. And there's no such thing as sport specific exercises. There's no such thing as X, Y, and Z. So it swings the pendulum back the other way. That's where we're at right now. It's these popular coaches online, or the people that even I respect them. They're saying there's no such thing as sport specific exercises. There's nothing you can do in the gym to mimic what you do on a mat or in a contact sport or combat sport. And while the number one way to be sport specific is play your fucking sport, I think they're almost missing the boat when they say that.
No.
I don't think that people are trying to do something because they want to do their sport more. Like, one of my biggest arguments is like gi pull-ups, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think gi pull-ups are as good as regular pull-ups. Do I think it's probably a waste of time? Like, you're trying to do too many things to do a gi pull-up. Yeah, right? That's an added complexity that we don't need when we're trying to train a specific quality. But guess what? If that's the only way that you can get, if say there's 7 people will do gi pull-ups and only 3 people will do regular pull-ups, I'm going to throw the fucking gi piece over the pull-up bar, and I'm going to get the 7 people to do gi pull-ups because that helps more people.
Right.
That we're just are at that point, you're arguing over semantics. And yes, the difference between a barbell pull-up and a just a regular pull-up and a gi pull-up, It might be 5%. It might be added complexity. It might look stupid to an educated strength coach. But if it gets more people to dive in to the strength and conditioning realm to understand they need to do something off the mat, who the fuck cares? Because the end of the day, we're trying to make athletes healthier. We're trying to make them perform higher. Whatever gets them into the door is honestly good with me. And then it's
Yeah.
on me to change the way they're thinking and being like, oh, let's rein you back in. This is why we don't need to do gi pull-ups. This is why I prefer regular pull-ups.
Yeah, so I think a good place to go from there, like you said, is like get the form of thinking around sport specific exercises. Like I'll kind of give my piece on how I think about sport specificity, or like I scale my specific exercises more towards the end of camp, and then maybe we can go into some of the shit where it goes wrong. Right
Yeah.
at the end, it's like how do we get too
Yes.
far off the deep end? Because
Instagram.
yeah, because
That is where it goes wrong. I
that will
promise.
happen. But no, my thought process around like how specific should my exercise be, right? Like this is a strength coach kind of take on it, but things I look at as we get closer to a competition, right? And I read an article and I can't remember for the life of me the name of the person who wrote it, but I'm matching three things, or I want my athlete to be prepared for three things, right? I want biomechanics to be readily available and an understood topic, right? And that could be biomechanics of what happens in a wrestling match, or just good biomechanics for a little bit of like risk of injury reduction, right? I want my bioenergetics styled, right? Like, and I look at that like energy systems, right? It's like, am I preparing this athlete for 3 5-minute rounds, right? I don't want them, tapering for a marathon when they're fighting a fight, right? That's just match up your stimulus for what you're preparing for. And the last one is like biodynamics, right? Which is kind of one that puzzles me, or did puzzle me in the past, but it's, are we moving in the same patterns and chaining together those type of, sling patterns, or those type of things that match up with the sport that we're doing, right? Are we training rotational power? Yes or no? Are we matching those things up more than just, does this knee biomechanically move right? And so I scale those three things further in general prep away from the sport, and then closer to the sport as we get later in camp, right? A GPP specificity rating might be, all right, biomechanics, we're going to work on weaknesses. What hurts you? How can we eliminate that risk? How can we get you to move better, right? Bioenergetics, okay, we're going to work on some capacity, right? We're going to work on maybe what your weakness is. Maybe we're going to look at you as a whole and address that rather than peak for the fight or think about 5-minute rounds. Okay. Biodynamics is like, do you have your 7 primal patterns dialed? Can you rotate? Can you split squat? Can you squat? Can you deadlift? Like things like that. I'm looking at like, are you biodynamics and everything working fluidly? And can we address those? Can we build more strength where we need to in those stunts? Right. So it's almost like more you-centric, more athletic based, which we've talked ad nauseum about how general prep is more athleticism based. We get deeper into camp. Okay. I'm looking at this fight. Okay. Biomechanically. All right. I know we're going to grapple a lot, right? Let's say that's a stylistic matchup. Okay. Am I doing enough to make them really strong and have a lot of strength endurance in like a deep squat where I have my chest over my hips? Am I biomechanically preparing them for that? Right? Bioenergetics. Okay, we're going to grapple a lot in this fight. Do I have the lactate system primed and ready for that? Are they ready on their minute recovery test? Are things dialed that way for the specific event coming up? Biodynamics is now we're peaking and we're looking at like, okay, my guy has a killer cross and he's powerful, right? Let's peak that power. Let's look more towards our effective weapons that are going to win us the fight and peak for those. And then maybe I'm taking a day of strength conditioning away. We're going down to 2 days a week. We're giving you more exposure to the competitive exercise, aka practice and sparring, less exposure to the general. Like we're just skewing the numbers in our terms, right? We're stacking the deck for ourselves in a competitive advantage versus a general advantage.
For sure. And following that kind of cascade is, I personally think, is not the norm when it comes to training combat athletes, even though I think it should be. I do the
Yeah.
exact same thing. I'm not going to repeat everything you said because I follow literally the exact same cascade.
Sure.
But it's, that needs to be the mainstay.
Yeah.
when we're looking at breaking down how to train combat athletes. And one of the things that goes into it, and one of the things I don't think a lot of people do, is break down the sport and break down the athlete. A
Yeah.
lot of the times we always talk about assess, assess, assess. Everybody breaks down, not everybody, but good coaches break down their athletes. Great coaches break down the sport. And I think a lot of the times, I think who says this all the time? I think it's JT Performance on Instagram. He's like, the best athletes in the world become a PhD in their sport.
Yeah.
The same can be said for strength and conditioning coaches or any coach in general. You need to become a PhD in the sport you're trying to work with, understand all three of those things: bioenergetics, biodynamics, and what was the third one?
Mechanics.
The easy one. And,
Yeah.
and biomechanics of the movements, and understand those to a T of what
Yeah.
goes into a combat athlete, depending on whichever sport you pick, right? Or all of them if you're working
Yeah.
with all combat athletics.
Yeah, and as a caveat to that, that's why we promote so much of like practicing
Go to
MMA,
sparring.
practicing
Go to
jujitsu,
fucking sparring.
or watching sparring, right? Dude, I'm telling you, my wrestling has leveled up so much, probably because I'm 29 and a man now and not wrestling at 21 and a young adult. But
A little boy.
because I fucking understand the concept of why my hips have to be under me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I went on this 8-year whatever strength conditioning journey to realize how I could be a better wrestler, right? Which is
Yeah.
fucking silly.
Ironic as fuck, right?
Yeah, right.
Dude, I go in, when I go wrestle with the guys, they all look, it's like, oh, you're strong. And I'm like, I promise you, when I was wrestling, not one person said that to me. I was the one that was slick. I was scrambly. I was mobile. Not one person told me I was fucking strong. And
Yeah.
here I am 8 years later. And the only compliment I get from anybody is, oh man, you're so strong. I'm like, fuck you, bitch.
Yeah,
Like, I
right.
am fluid. I take offense to that.
Dude, and like it's hard to unsee that lens now. Like I'm even coaching practice earlier today, and we're talking about reattacks, right? Like I've stuffed to a front head, I'm letting the head escape, and I'm taking back to my double. It's like I see people on their knees getting
Mhm.
elongated. I see guys with their asses up in the air on a bent over, like trying to do a dump, and I'm like, guys, this is not like this is wrestling skill. Don't get me wrong, it's a wrestling fucking skill and learn this position, but do a motherfucking squat. Like, goddamn, get your hips under your chest, right? Like, that's just like athletic positioning, right? So, that's a little bit of kind of like almost, converse of what we're talking about when we see the general into the specific,
Yeah.
right? And so, that holds a lot of value in itself because athletes that are great at their sport, they succeed for specific reasons, and it could be for specific reasons, it could be for general reasons,
Mm-hmm.
it could be for a mix of the two, right? I work with an athlete who excels in cardiovascular and pacing type of mechanics, and that's a general skill.
Mm-hmm.
And then the general strength skill is in the dumps, and then the technical proficiency skill is super high, the technical execution skill is pretty low, right? So like these stat bars are all over the place. That's why you have to analyze the sport, the matchup, the athlete in front of you, not just looking at movement patterns. That
You
drives
mean
me
the
fucking crazy.
FMS isn't enough anymore?
Let's get a professional athlete in front of me, do an FMS, and I'm gonna tell you how good a mover you are. No, motherfucker. Go watch some fucking fight film. Go
Yep.
watch that person
100%.
move in the cage, right?
Dude,
Like,
you don't find out more than going, if you're working with Izzy, watching him fight his last
yeah,
5 fights and watching how fluid, or Sean O'Malley's a good example, his
yeah,
scapular control as he's able to go out there, the way he's able to get longer. You can tell so much about that man's biomechanics by just watching a fight, even and in real time. Like,
yeah.
if you can't pick it up in real time and you're a strength and conditioning coach, you need better fucking classes.
Eyes, yeah.
Yeah.
Eyes.
Like, you
Not
need to train
glasses, eyes.
yourself better if you're trying to work with fighters, because you should be able to see these different movements that are happening. And that's how you become a better coach. That's how you help your athletes more. And that's why I think, even if sport specific is kind of poo pooed right now, I think it's an extremely important part of the training paradigm, because again, it gets the athlete to understand why they're doing what they're doing without having to say it. They innately get it.
Yeah. And quite honestly, a lot of the times, and this is I think where we can segue to things getting off the rails a little bit, but sometimes when you're making a sports general prep or specific prep call, it's fucking inconsequential. right?
Yeah. It's
In
like
a
a
lot of my shit,
3% difference.
right? In a lot of my shit, right? I talk like carries are a good
Yeah.
example, right? Okay, you don't have to carry a dumbbell. You don't have to carry kettlebells for your farmer carry. Hold a motherfucking bag, right? Or give them plates to pinch grip. A pinch grip, it's amazing how many athletes just think a pinch grip is more sport specific, or a cannonball grip on the head of a dumbbell, right? It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, yes, you're working a little more grip and this and that, and like, and the internet might label that sport specific. That's fucking general, bro. Like,
You want to know the funniest thing that people think is sport specific is fat grips.
yeah, oh my goodness.
Dude, that's the fun.
It's
They're
the
like, oh,
exact
it's so
size
much,
of a forearm.
so much more specific to MMA and combat sports. I'm like, bitch, there are people that don't even know what a mat is that are using these things. They don't give
Oh
a
my
shit.
goodness.
That doesn't make it more similar to grabbing a wrist. Get the
I
fuck
mean,
out of here.
or Zercher squats, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who the fuck decided that Zercher squats mimic wrestling?
I mean, from a trunk stability standpoint, most similar squat. But it does, I don't know. I'm not lifting people like this. If I am, I probably fucked up or that
Yeah,
person's
yeah. Or
terrible.
you're wrestling somebody that's very bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not good. And
So,
it's like, but again, that's a thing though. Zercher
yeah,
squats are cool as fuck. I love Zercher squats. Now, they are not sport specific only,
yeah,
but an athlete can understand that it's a front loaded carry and I'm able to squat in that pattern. That
yeah,
immediately gets them to understand what it feels like because it shoots their hips back like they're trying to push somebody to the wall.
yeah,
Like this is actually a good sport specific drill that I like. Is there's a coach out here, Chad Ike, that does this. It's one of the things that he does, I think, really well. Is he'll have people in a Zercher position against the wall, and he'll have them train that squat pattern, trying to push their hips in against the wall.
yeah.
That trains them to get that pressure forward when they're going against the cage. I like that squat a lot. I think that's super useful.
Yeah, and like that just reminds me all the time. Like next UFC fight night card or whatever you're watching, just watch people's posture on the walls.
Dude.
Right? When you watch posture on the walls, it is so easy to tell who's going to win that clinch position, or who's going to get taken down per se, right? I see a couple things. The guy that has his ass stuck way out into the center of the cage and just is bent at an L trying to pin the guy on the cage,
Yeah,
right?
on
Like,
like their high thigh.
yeah, that L shape is not a good athletic position in any capacity. And then the other one I see is a guy flat against the wall, and then he kind of side bends into an L to like play defense, and it's like
Oof.
that guy is getting taken down.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, I hope he is.
yeah, if he's got a good wrestling.
If not, the other dude needs to figure it the fuck out.
Yeah. So again, there are good pathways to process this and see it. Like when you go to sparring, it's like, okay, the knee does go over the toe really harshly in a wrestling shot, or like, it does take a lot of footwork and three-dimensional movement, and you see those things in the cage. And I don't want to discourage people from like reverse engineering some of those movements.
Right.
I think that's where you get some of your gold, or you can find some nuggets there. But the problems occur when we dive too far in a rabbit hole on one of those three kind of categories we talked about with biomechanics, bioenergetics, or biodynamics.
Well, the problems occur when that's all we do.
Yeah.
That's when the problems occur. When we
Yeah.
get away from any sort, like when we get away from just doing a fucking deadlift or a trap bar
Yeah.
deadlift or a squat.
We
If we're
replace everything
only,
with it. Yeah.
yeah, if we're only doing fucking atom bag squats, that's a problem too.
Yeah.
That's where those hard-o strength coaches that say nothing is specific as the sport. That's where those guys, that's where they're coming from when they say that, because they see people doing those other things. It's not black and white. There's a whole lot of gray in there, and I think gray is good in this case.
Yeah, and like again, when you're only doing that, it's like you're still actually practicing a sport. You're just doing it in the worst possible fashion.
Yeah, you're just doing it poorly.
Yeah, which is a wild thing to spend your time doing, right? But again, in doses, or when we get too far down the rabbit hole on like the biodynamics one is the one that I see so often is like, okay, this guy, throws an uppercut like this. So I'm going to have him on a hack squat machine, squat and try and throw the hack squat through the roof. It's like, like we're only thinking about the biodynamics in that sense. Or bioenergetics we see all the time too, is like we have to create a 5-minute circuit that mimics sparring energy demands and then give them 1 minute rest and do it again. It's like,
So that's the
that shit
only
was
way to
being,
condition any athlete.
dude, that's horrible. And that shit was done in the 90s. Like,
Don't
let's
get me
move
wrong.
on.
Well, my thing is, don't get me wrong. There's a time and a place for 5 on 1 off, right? That's
Sure.
not a bad thing. But if that's all you do, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because that means that you are literally sitting like if you're on video, if this is a great coach and this is a good coach, a coach that only does 5 on 1 off is down here because you haven't thought about everything else. You haven't thought about trying to lift up the alactic power because I
Yeah.
guarantee you're not getting that in 5 on 1 off.
Mm-mm.
You haven't thought about doing any sort of lactate threshold work because I guarantee you're not doing that with 5 on 1 off. There's
Yeah.
all these different components that go into conditioning an athlete. And if you only focus on trying to make it look as similar to a fight as possible, you're leaving a lot of shit on the table.
Yeah, and you're not critically thinking about it, right? Like that's like one of my favorite tropes, or not favorite tropes, but like one of the most ironic things I see is like, holding mitts or doing boxing practice or whatever is like we get all the way to the end of practice, like, all right, now we're gonna burn them out. It's like practice already did that, bro. You're just like your training mentality, right?
Now you're making tired people tired.
100%. And so it's just the more we can critically think about the exercises we're putting in front of the athlete that we're doing, not just critically think of like, does this look like their sport? Is this going to be better, make them better at their sport? But critically think, what am I sacrificing to get this movement in? Is that trade-off worth it? What I have this practice plan in front of me, or hopefully I've written a practice plan. What is this conditioning drill actually doing?
Hopefully, you've wrote a practice plan.
Right.
That is key number one here, Alex.
But like, what is that conditioning drill at the end truly doing for athletes? Because I'm not against mental toughness and grinding people to the fucking to dust at the end of practice, right? Like that's part of my practice sometimes too. But like know the purpose behind it, right? I'm not going to say, all right, we're training, lactic capacity today, 20-minute grind match. We'll train lactic capacity in some aspects, but the 20-minute grind match is grit and can you decide to win when you fucking are dead,
yeah,
right?
that's not lactic capacity.
Right, exactly. So
I don't know what lactate system you have.
I wish, bro. But it's just like the more critical thought we can put behind what we're planning and when we do it and how it's getting done, right? Like I feel like the first half of this podcast when we were talking about if it gets people in the gym, then it's okay. That's like us finding an excuse of why it's okay, right? Or why something like we're searching for something that could be meaningful. And the most meaningful thing is we're getting people healthier in training, right? And so how else can it be meaningful? And is it meaningful at the expense of something that could be more meaningful?
Right.
Right? Because getting people in the gym is not more meaningful than being altruistic to your general back squat principles. Right? Does that make sense?
No, explain it.
Okay. So getting people in the gym is
you just threw a back squat in out of fucking nowhere.
Sure. I think of a back squat as a very general exercise.
Okay.
But getting people in the gym is more meaningful than staying true to your general exercise philosophy.
Okay, you said it reversed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the principle of like, what's going to be the most meaningful thing for this athlete?
Yeah.
Do that thing.
100%. Yeah. And have a reason why they do that.
Yeah.
thing.
Critically think about it.
Yeah. Like we've said it on a multiple podcasts. You should be able to answer why to every exercise that's in your program. If you can't give a good reason why and not just some bullshit that you make up on the spot, if you can't sit there and write out 2 to 3 layers of why it's in your program, it shouldn't be there. Same with like sport. This isn't just strength coaches. This is sport coaches too. This is dietitians. This is chiropractors, sports chiropractors, physical therapists. If you can't answer why that specific thing is going on in 2 to 3 different ways, why are you doing it? No pun intended. Because it's a waste of both mine and my athletes' time. Our athletes do so much.
Mm-hmm.
MMA athletes are the hardest working and lowest paid athletes in the entire world in any sport. And it's not just MMA, it's all combat sports. Honestly, MMA is the highest paid of all the combat athletes.
Right, yeah.
Like, I think about like an Olympic wrestler. The lowest paid, highest worked athlete in the entire world if you're in the US.
Yep.
And guess what? If I'm going to give them some dumb bullshit that could be wasting 35 minutes of their time, that's something you cannot do. Like I was trying to think of any terrible thing, but I'm not going to go where the things I was thinking. So that's just something you cannot do. And
Yep.
it hurts you and it hurts your athlete. And if you don't care about hurting your athlete, make sure you're not fucking hurting yourself. Like if you're
Well,
selfish, if you really don't care about the athlete in front of you, don't be a dick and hurt yourself then.
well, there you go. No, I totally agree. It's like, again, that's just critical thought and being good at your job. That's even less of a like sport specific rant, I think. But yeah, justify what you're doing and find really good context for it, right? Like, don't get stuck in this. I'm a unique, pretty butterfly
Oh,
type of
what's
stuff.
the worst sport specific exercise you've seen on Instagram or YouTube or TikTok? I don't know if you have a TikTok.
I'm pretty thorough about filtering my Instagram, and I unfollow a lot of people pretty chronically. But I was sent an exercise of people laying down with their hips on a Bosu ball or a yoga ball, and they're like kicking up at a hack squat machine, and we're
I've seen that
calling
one a
that,
bunch.
and
That's a
we're
speed of sport thing or speed of sport. That's a Southern Cali thing. There's like a gym down there that it's
okay,
only about quick go, go, go,
yeah,
go,
and
go,
we're
fast repetitive
gonna
movements.
pretend that's sport specific to a like a butterfly sweep.
Yeah, it's not sport specific.
Right. It's like, oh, well,
Yep. Oh, dude. I know what you're talking about. I know what gym does that. Yeah.
sure, whatever. But I just saw it and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's like, I try really hard to grasp why you're putting that in a program and why I see 17 people doing it. It's like, but
Yeah.
mm-mm,
There's a couple that I see that bug me.
mm-hmm.
One of them is 97 bands on different points around the athlete while they're doing like a squat or a movement,
Yeah.
because you got a band on the neck, you got a band on the low back, you got a band on two knees, pulling it in different directions because that's what's going to happen because combat sports are unpredictable. Shut the fuck up. Like that is a 1% return for 10 minutes of setup. That's not worth it.
Dude,
Like,
it's so I have another one. I can't wrap my head around it and understand how this is a part of like high level, anything high level at all. Have you seen these things that are like banded backpacks that you wear? That like pull
no.
your arms back
Oh,
and like
yes. That
they're
you
like,
punch with?
yeah, and it's like
Yeah.
like literally like a spider on your back, kind of like pulling you backwards.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm just like, what? How
It's like
did
the people that shadow box with weight, which
somebody?
every study ever has shown that doesn't work.
Yeah, somebody
But
really is good at talking, I think.
yeah, 100%. Dude, that's where a lot of these things come in, is that you get a really good salesman that can
Yeah.
sell a pitch, and you get somebody who's influential to take it over because they got it offered to them for free. And
Yep.
then it spreads like wildfire.
Yep. Yeah. So
But
again, not performance based, thought out ideologies.
yeah, think about what you're doing, folks. That's a number one point in our podcast today. But
Craziness.
TLDR, too long, didn't read. Hardo strength coaches that say there's no such thing as sports specific, you're wrong too. Sports specific is a spectrum.
I love this. You're wrong. You're wrong. We're all wrong.
That's what I'm going for here. Sports specific only strength coaches, you're definitely wrong. You need to figure it out. Have some of your athletes do a bench press here and there. I promise it's okay. They'll be okay. Their shoulders will be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point in time, you need to blend both. That's what a good program looks like. And it depends on what phase of camp or what phase of competition that athlete's in. I'm not going to have my athlete 1 week out doing a whole bunch of general shit. I'm not going to have my athlete that just finished up a fight 3 weeks ago do a whole bunch of specific shit. It comes down to using that brain that you got at the top of your head. And if you use that, I bet you're going to be a better coach. So that is my rant about
Beautiful.
sports specific training, because it's annoyed me on both ends. So fuck both of y'all. Anyways, if you guys got to get in touch with us, all of information is in the show notes. So that's going to be our Instagrams and our emails. If you're looking for any strength and conditioning programming, we got some sports specific shit in there for you. That's going to be available at buildingafighter.com. That's anything from a custom program, a preset option, and a membership option. All of those at buildingafighter.com. And as always, it's Dr. Austin Shane.
Alex Friedman.
And we are out.